Chapter 756, Grand Mass. After waiting nearly 10 minutes outside the prayer hall, Klein and the other believers who were here to join the Moon Mass entered under the priest's lead. In the dark and serene atmosphere, they heard uniform and ethereal chanting. Full-faced above the land stood the crimson moon, and sweet it was to dream of themselves, of child and wife and parents, but evermore. Holy and rhythmic voices echoed in the prayer hall as the believers involuntarily quietened down, as though they had forgotten all their frustrations in life or the different challenges they faced in the real world. Under the guidance of a few priests, they found their seats. In front of the altar, Bishop Electra, who was in charge of celebrating the Mass, held the revelation of Evernight and began preaching. As this segment came to an end, the priests held up water and bread, and they began handing them out to Klein and Company. This was the loving grace of Evernight, food that people both alive and dead could share. Having not had dinner, Klein naturally didn't waste the bread of average quality and the water in the cup. Then he saw candles light up on the altar, and under the darkness they appeared like stars in the night sky, emitting light and warmth that eased one's heart. At that moment, Bishop Electra led the few priests and everyone in the choir to chant in unison. We look upward into the night sky. We tenderly say her name, Evernight Goddess. We know no other words, except Evernight Goddess, Evermome, may the goddess draw out from the angel chorus. With the silence sweet to gather, and hold both within her right hand which is gentle. Goddess, if she heard us, she would surely agree. Smiling with purity at the dead, "Come, rest and sleep well, my children." The empty voice, filled with holiness, drilled into every believer's ears. It felt as though all the spirits present were resonating in unison. As a Sequence 5 Beyonder, Klein felt as though his soul body was being cleansed, as his spirituality naturally flowed out in comfort. Following that, a tranquil darkness seemed to appear before his eyes, a darkness without any sound. In the darkness, corpses lay there, their faces calm and at peace, as though they weren't dead and were actually in a deep sleep. Klein calmly traversed the darkness in a staid manner when he suddenly stopped and looked diagonally ahead. At a spot where moonflowers were silently blooming, there were a few people sleeping. They were the hatless Dunsmith in a trench coat, old Neil, who still wore his black classic robe, and the short Kenley, who worked hard to save up money. They closed their eyes in a relaxed manner as a faint smile appeared to show on their lips. Around them were erected tombs, each of them having the same word written on them, Guardian. Klein instantly closed his eyes as a holy and ethereal voice resounded by his ears. Cross your hands humbly, over your breast, make the silent prayer, and shout from the bottom of your heart, the only escape is tranquility. Klein lowered his head, closed his eyes, and raised his hands up before crossing them before his chest. He then repeated silently,
"The only escape is tranquility. The only escape is tranquility."
This repeated again and again until the prayer hall reached a state of extreme silence. Only then did Klein open his eyes again and rubbed the corners of his eyes. He slowly exhaled and glanced around him. With the light from the candles, he discovered that most of the believers were covered in tears without realizing it. Even his valet, Richardson, was constantly tearing up without wiping his tears.
The Moon Mass is akin to a ritual with beyonder powers involved. Its effect is likely to make everyone's spirit resonate, allowing different people to see the deceased who they share deep relationships in the darkness. It relieves one's grief in order to obtain tranquility. Yes, this isn't an abnormality that's targeted at beyonders, so I can be at ease. To ordinary people, this might be an illusory outlet that's instantaneous. They would only believe that it's a result of the goddess's greatness, and not some extraordinary powers. Sequence 5 Beyonders of the Evernight pathway seem to gain a significant enhancement in their control of spirits.
Klein withdrew his gaze as he made a judgment. Right on the heels of that, he recalled the darkness and the deceased that lay amidst the moonflowers. Closing his eyes, Klein allowed his thoughts to drift.
That dark plain filled with moonflowers, night vanilla, and slumber flowers is a manifestation of the goddess's divine kingdom. What is the source of danger in the nighttime inside that battle of the gods' ruin correspond to then?
Klein gradually outlined the cold darkness and the fog that enveloped the sea on the eastern front of the Sonia Sea. In the fog there was an ancient, pitch-black cathedral with a steeple. Ravens spiraled above it as though they were holding a memorial or were in grief. And around the cathedral were ordinary residents, simple wood huts, grayish-white mills, and indistinct figures.
Logically speaking, this foggy scene that's intricately tied to the night and dreams should be formed from the aura left behind when the goddess slayed Annihilation demonic wolf. But it doesn't have any similarities with the corresponding divine kingdom. Yes, mortals can't pry into the secrets of deities, so perhaps the dark plains filled with flowers isn't the projection of the divine kingdom, but rather an outcome of the ritual.
Seeing that the moon mass was coming to an end, Klein reached into his inner pocket and took out his wallet. Holding his wallet, he got up and entered the aisle, walked straight to the altar, and under Bishop Electra's compassionate watch, he walked diagonally over to the donation box. He tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion, drawing out the crimson moon before throwing in all his large denomination notes, a total of £300. At that moment, Klein didn't feel the pinch like the previous few times. He was in a very calm mood because he recalled the ritual old Neil had used to repay his debt. Back then, they picked up a wallet containing £300, all thanks to the goddess's blessings. Taking a step back, he drew the crimson moon once again, and he gave his spot to the donor behind him. At that moment, Bishop Electra walked over and said as he drew the crimson moon,
"May the goddess bless you."
May the goddess know about it. What I wish for now is to receive some teachings.
Klein replied with a smile. Bishop Electra glanced at the prayer hall's side door and said,
"If you don't mind waiting 15 minutes, I can explain the Bible to you in the library."
I would love that,
Klein said with a warm smile. Bishop Electra immediately got a priest to lead Duane Dantes and his servant out the prayer hall through a side door as they circled around a spiral staircase to the nearby library. There was a huge bookshelf here, and on it were various books from the Church of the Evernight Goddess. There were tables and chairs lining the sides for priests and bishops to study and preach to the believers. 12 minutes later, Bishop Electra entered the library with a calming smile and saw Duane Dantes with his white sideburns standing in front of a bookshelf, flipping through a book with great focus. He exuded the vibes of a scholar, Habboha. He asked with a smile,
"What are you reading?"
Klein snapped the book together and said with a self-deprecating smile,
The Revelation of Evernight. To be frank, although I'm a pious believer of the goddess, I've never had the time to seriously sit down and read the Bible due to my busy life.
As he spoke, he didn't show any odd signs on his face, but he felt uneasy deep down. He was afraid the goddess would smite him with a bolt of lightning to reward this pious believer, Duane Dantes.
Well, lightning isn't in the goddess's domain.
Klein consoled himself. Bishop Electra smiled and took the Revelation of Evernight from his hands.
It's never too late to begin.
Following that, he invited Duane Dantes to sit down beside a table and systematically introduced the Revelation of Evernight's structure and the corresponding holy word. Richardson held his employer's hat and cane, and he stood a slight distance away, silently waiting to listen to the bishop's preachings. Time ticked by when Klein, who appeared serious, suddenly felt his spiritual perception trigger. A scene outside the door naturally surfaced in his mind. This was an intuitive foresight that stemmed from a clown, one that had been enhanced by the gray fog. Outside the door, an elder dressed in a black clergyman robe walked by and headed for the nearby spiral staircase. He had lush white hair but didn't comb it, making him look rather disheveled. He had a thin face that made it appear as though he was bones wrapped in skin. He exuded a rather cold bearing, and his skin was abnormally pale. His eyes were a rare, pure black. This figure quickly vanished from the door as the footsteps gradually sounded like they were coming from above.
A keeper. But it's not the one I met at the prayer hall. It's his turn today?
Klein paid attention to Bishop Electra as he wore a contemplative look over the Bible's contents. He wasn't surprised that a keeper would appear inside the cathedral and pass by the library at this time. This was because the sealing forces behind Channis Gate would reach its peak at night. It wasn't suitable for living creatures to remain inside. Therefore, the keepers only entered at sunrise and left at sunset. It had just turned dark.
I need to remember what day and date it is today. Later, with more information, I'll be able to figure out the keeper's rotation schedule. This way, I'll be able to act as the corresponding target at the right time.
Klein reined in his thoughts as he listened attentively. Finally, he got up and bade farewell 30 minutes later. Mahara. He smiled and said to Bishop Electra,
I'm wondering if I have the honor to listen to your preachings in the future.
No problem.
Faced with a tycoon who had just donated 300 pounds, Bishop Electra couldn't reject him. He even happily nodded.
As long as you come to the cathedral and I have the time.
Klein didn't harp on the details to prevent any suspicion. He earnestly thanked him and left St. Samuel Cathedral with Richardson. He returned home before 8 and enjoyed dinner as he leisurely spent the rest of his night. Late at night, inside the master bedroom, the sleeping Klein suddenly opened his eyes. His spiritual intuition told him that someone had infiltrated his mansion. Chapter 757, Dream Encounter.
Someone has infiltrated the compound?
Klein didn't immediately sit up. All he did was turn his body to the side and reached his left palm under his pillow. He secretly held death knell, and at the same time, he slowly spread his left hand open, preparing to activate creeping hunger. After knowing that it was difficult to find food for creeping hunger in Backland, he had infiltrated the prisons in Desi Bay's Conant City, found an inmate on death row, and confirmed that there wasn't any mistake in the judgment before feeding him to the glove.
The Rose School of Thought has locked on to me? No, it's impossible for them to be that quick. Besides, if it's them, they wouldn't just come but would wait for an opportunity. They will seize the opportunity when I'm passing by a secluded spot and strike, so as to not alarm Backland's official organizations. I donated too much money at the Moon Mass, causing criminals to target me? A generous tycoon who just came to Backland from a foreign land is indeed an easy target. Of course, I can't rule out the routine investigations of the Nighthawks.
As thoughts flashed through his mind, Klein heard a soft noise coming from the balcony in the adjoining half-open room. Right on the heels of that, there was the sound of a lock turning as the floor-to-ceiling window was pulled open nearly silently. Klein carefully listened and sensed the footsteps pass through the half-open room and into the corridor. After a pause, the footsteps walked towards the master bedroom before passing it, turning the doorknob to his valet's room.
He went into the wrong room? Or could it be that he's here to find Richardson?
Klein's heart stirred as he released his grip on death knell. He then reached out to the iron cigar case, which wasn't too far. After he removed the wall of spirituality, an illusory figure in a dark red coat, an old triangular hat appeared beside him. It then walked into the full-body mirror. When Senor, the wraith marionette, jumped to the glass window in Richardson's room, he saw a figure with orange-yellow skin, raven-black hair, and soft facial features walk out of the room. As for Richardson, he was silently sitting by the edge of his bed, his body leaning forward. His back was hunched up like he was fused into the darkness. Horror colored his face as he showed a weak and stumped expression. Finally, he fell silent.
The person is indeed here for Richardson. His traits resemble that of someone from the southern continent. He's agile and skilled. He's likely not an ordinary person. This is a friend that Richardson got to know at the manor in the southern continent, or could it be a maternal relative? Richardson is only a valet with an annual salary of 35 pounds. What matter would need his help?
Klein guessed as he used Senor's vision to observe. At that moment, he suddenly realized why Richardson was good at observation and often stayed in the balcony to size up any pedestrians.
He was afraid of being found. I hope it's not too big a problem and won't affect my plans. I'll later divine the matter. If Richardson is unable to resolve the problem, I'll have to find an excuse to terminate his services.
Seeing his valet lie back down, Klein pulled back his wraith marionette. Meanwhile, Leonard Mitchell, who lived at 7 Pinster Street, once again entered the fog-immersed backland. He had previously questioned the Daily Observer reporter Mike Joseph and received the news that Sherlock Moriarty didn't proactively involve himself in Lenevis's matter. Instead, he participated in a discussion after being hired. This made any suspicions regarding him drop drastically. If it wasn't because this detective had been slightly involved in Capim's matter and how he had a close relationship with Emlyn White from the Harvest Church, Leonard Mitchell would have had thoughts of giving up the investigation to continue his search for Insang Will. As Sherlock Moriarty didn't have many friends at the Quelaag Club, with one of them dying in the matter involving Prince Edisac while the other was reporter Mike Joseph. Therefore, Leonard only had one target left, Dr. Aaron Series.
Most people that Sherlock Moriarty know are involved in Beyonder matters. This detective sure isn't an ordinary someone.
From the dossiers, this doctor was once involved in a Beyonder matter of the monster pathway. After the item was swapped, he stopped being unlucky or having nightmares. His life returned back on track. As Leonard thought, he rang the doorbell in Aaron Series' dream. Upon entering the dream, he casually found a sofa to sit in and said to Dr. Aaron, who was opposite him,
Tell me in detail how you got to know Sherlock Moriarty.
In the dream, Aaron didn't lie. He started from how Mrs. Mary had introduced Sherlock Moriarty into the Quelaag Club and how he was one of the recommenders. He continued until the detective suggested that he inform the Church of the Evernight Goddess's bishop about his abnormal matters.
The truth is described in the dossiers. Sherlock Moriarty seems rather friendly towards the official Beyonder organizations, and he was endorsed by Isengard Stanton.
Leonard glanced at the mustache Sherlock which Dr. Aaron conjured and retracted his gaze as he listened attentively. After Aaron finished recounting everything in detail, he said,
He headed to the south for a vacation, and he hasn't returned. I've been worried about him all this while. However, he's a detective filled with wisdom and a kind heart. I believe nothing bad will happen to him. I just wish that he can participate in the celebration of my child's birth.
Perhaps.
Leonard suspected that Sherlock Moriarty might never return to Backland. He then politely bade farewell and walked out of Dr. Aaron's dream. After taking a few steps forward, he subconsciously looked back and saw that inside the house with a garden, blurry spherical lights that represented different dreams filled the entire space. Everything was fine.
Was it a mistake on my part? I keep feeling as though something about me is changing.
Leonard muttered as he turned to fly to Pinster Street. Everywhere he could see was covered in dense fog. The street lamps were gloomy and pale. Suddenly, Leonard stopped flying as he cast his gaze at a building. In that house, there were about 5 spherical lights floating in silence, making it look different from the other buildings. However, Leonard's spiritual perception told him that there was apparently a black blob in the house, which could absorb all light. Furthermore, he discovered that he didn't recognize the street he was at. He felt alarmed, suspecting if he had seen something he shouldn't see. He hurriedly retracted his gaze as he prepared to leave and head for his residence. At that moment, the building that looked ordinary sounded with a teasing voice.
Why don't you come in for a cup of tea?
Thoughts erupted in Leonard's mind as he flew up at high speeds without even thinking. In his spiritual perception, the terrace houses lining the back, the garden, and tiny buildings were burgeoning in size as the windows and doors turned into mouths that were biting at him. The nearby black street lamps were extending in height, making the surroundings appear like a forest of steel that seemed to stop Leonard. Leonard didn't stop or turn back. He felt a chill down his back as it became more obvious and deeper. His body slowly stiffened as though he was being grabbed by countless invisible hands. Just as he felt that he couldn't hold out any longer, he saw a familiar house where a familiar window and lights stood. He held his breath, plunged down abruptly, and fell back into his dream. Phew! He jolted awake and found himself drenched in cold sweat. Narrator. Leonard retracted his legs from the desk's edge and asked with a sense of lingering fear.
Old man, what did I actually encounter?
The slightly aged voice in his mind replied after a few seconds.
I'm not sure.
Leonard's eyelid drooped immediately as he didn't pursue the matter. He then cast his gaze out the window and saw lights everywhere in the backland night sky. It was tranquil. 160 Bulkland Street, inside Dwayne Dantes's mansion. Richardson entered the room and said to Klein,
Sir, Ma'am Wahana Hyson is here.
Klein put down his papers and looked up, glancing at his valet. He discovered that he was still an apprehensive man of few words, silent and reserved. There was nothing odd with him.
If it wasn't because the divination outcome was okay, suddenly firing an employee will incur suspicion.
Klein silently mumbled. He stood up as though nothing had happened, and he got Richardson to help him wear his coat. 15 minutes later, he was holding his etiquette teacher, Wahana Hyson, in an embrace as he began to learn another common dance used at social events. After a while, Wahana praised Dwayne Dantes for his progress. When she was done, she added,
I feel as though I'll be losing my job in a few days. However, you're still a little restrained. Although you don't have to act like intis men who cling closely to the ladies, you don't have to constantly maintain a distance. It's very normal to make occasional contact. The way you are behaving now makes you appear rigid and dull.
Klein pulled her in a little and replied with a smile.
I was afraid of being rude.
Does this mean that being too close to ladies is an act of rudeness? It also implies I'm full of charm, and that he might embarrass himself if he's too close. This is quite a euphemistic form of praise.
Wahana thought and said with a smile,
You have learned well.
The dance continued as Klein looked at Wahana Hyson's face as he asked warmly in a casual manner,
Ma'am, you seem frustrated.
Wahana lowered her head and chuckled.
It's nothing serious. My husband is a businessman, and he recently had some minor conflicts with some people. We can resolve the matter. Oh, your question was too direct. Before both parties have established a friendship, it's best not to ask about their matters, unless she has made it obvious.
Compared to you who comes and goes in families of high society, thus, knowing many madams and ladies, as a tycoon who just arrived in Backland, I do lack the necessary social connections.
Klein nodded gently and said with a smile,
I thought we were no longer strangers.
He then skipped the topic and began talking about his own experiences and his neighbors. Wahana would mention a few things in response, allowing Klein to better grasp the traits and preferences of his neighbor. After Wahana left, Klein stood at the door for some time before turning to say to his butler,
Walter, find out what trouble Ma'am Wahana is facing. If she can't resolve it, we will provide her with some timely assistance.
Chapter 758. Efforts will ultimately pay off. In the evening, Klein, who had just returned from St. Samuel Cathedral, was just about to enter the dining hall on the second floor when he saw butler Walter walk over and say with a polite bow,
Sir, the matter you wish to be investigated has been completed.
Klein didn't inquire further in front of the other servants as he staidly nodded.
Let's talk in the study.
Walter followed behind him and came all the way to the third floor. Richardson then opened the door and lit the gas wall lamp inside. Klein unhurriedly walked to his desk, sat down, and looked at the butler for the report. As Walter gestured Richardson to guard outside the door, he approached the desk and deliberated over his words. After the door closed again, he said,
Ma'am Wahana's husband is a cloth merchant. He had been cooperating with someone and had invested £1,000 into it, but the other party ran off with the goods. She has already sought the help of Member of Parliament Mocht and Ma'am Rihanna to urge the police department to crack the case as quickly as possible. However, the police usually doesn't dare to guarantee that they can find the target for such cases.
Klein picked up the black fountain pen on his desk and stroked it.
To Ma'am Wahana's family, £1,000 isn't a small sum.
Based on what he knew, an ordinary home tutor didn't earn more than £150 a year. If the employer provided boarding and lodging, the salary would be even lower. Although Wahana served high society and had many employers, her annual income capped out at about £400 to £500. Furthermore, a large amount of her expenses would be spent on her dressing, posture, and looks to prevent her employers from finding her unfitting as an etiquette teacher.
Yes, her husband's income as a cloth merchant can only be considered average. To him, a £1,000 investment is a rather huge investment.
Walter said by mincing his words.
It's a lot for me, too.
Klein sighed and smiled.
I just came to Backlund, so I'm not very familiar with the police.
Walter immediately replied,
Sir, back when I was under the service of Viscount Conrad, I knew a few members of a Backlund High-Ranking Police Officer Association.
Backlund High-Ranking Police Officer Association? That would be the most important members at Civilaris Yard. Even the chief superintendents who are in charge of an entire borough might not be qualified for induction.
Civilis Yard referred to the Backlund Police Department. It got its name from the street it was located at.
As expected of a butler who served under a noble family,
Klein sighed inwardly as he smiled with a shake of his head.
There's no need to do so for the time being. On this aspect, I'm sure Mam Wahana is able to seek the help of many people, be it Member of Parliament Macht or others. All of them have the ability to make Civilis Yard place importance on the case.
He paused and deliberately said in passing,
I've seen the lower rungs of society, and I know their methods of survival. At times, the police might not be as useful as gang members or bounty hunters. Walter, go to the police department to retrieve the corresponding details, and head over to the famous bars in the Backlund Bridge area and East Borough to commission a bounty mission. Regardless if they find the corresponding criminals or the batch of cloth, I'll be giving them £200 in return. Heh, let's hope that those cheats had chosen to remain in Backlund.
A reward of £200?
Walter repeated the sum as he couldn't help but steal a glance at his employer, as though he found it unbelievable that he would offer so much for Wahana's matter. He turned agape and was just about to say something, but ultimately kept silent. All he did was seriously reply,
All right, sir.
I'll give you this money directly.
Klein slowly got up and took out his wallet. As Walter received the thick wad of cash, he asked in thought,
Should I tell Mam Wahana?
Klein smiled.
There's no need.
Enlightened, Walter nodded with a bow.
Your generosity will spread through this street.
East Borough, Daravi Street, in a cramped but lively pub. Shio, who had seriously combed her short blonde hair before heading out, squeezed through the area filled with men that stank of alcohol and putrid sweat, and arrived at the bar counter. She tapped the counter and asked the bartender,
Any new missions today?
If it were anyone else who asked without ordering any drinks, the bartender would have ignored them, but upon recognizing Gio, a bounty hunter who no one wanted drinking, he could only sigh and say,
A very handsome reward, £200.
£200?
Zio nearly suspected that she had heard wrong. Apart from Miss Audrey's mission, she had never seen such a handsome reward in East Borough or the Backlund Bridge area. Even the mission to seek out Isaac Eggers that drove bounty hunters crazy had only offered £150. For an ordinary bounty hunter, completing a commission like this was enough for them to not work for a year. To Shio, it was equally important because she had been helping the mysterious man in the golden mask over the past few months. She had learned that the man was from MI9, and she was trying to earn enough contributions to exchange for the interrogator potion formula. Therefore, the reward she received when completing his tasks only paid a little. Most of it was exchanged towards her contribution goals, so all her savings came from the advantages that her sheriff sequence had given her to capture criminals.
Once I receive the potion formula, I still have to spend money to buy the Beyonder ingredients, and I only have 300-odd pounds. Fours is right. Money isn't omnipotent, but it's sufficiently important.
Upon having this thought, she looked at the bartender and asked cautiously,
What's the mission? Who commissioned it?
Find a few cheats. They cheated the victim of cloth costing £1,000.
As the bartender handed the details to Shio, he said,
The person who commissioned the mission looked like a butler. He called himself a Walter, and he's in service of a Mr. Dwayne Dantes from Buckland Street. If you capture the cheats or find the cloth, you can head there to retrieve the bounty.
Gio quickly flipped through the documents as something quickly formulated in her mind. She instinctively knew the direction in which to continue the investigations.
I'll take this mission,
She said immediately with a nod. The bartender shrugged and said,
You aren't the only one. All the bounty hunters have taken on this mission. Besides, they have other ideas.
Like what?
Gio asked out of curiosity. The bartender chuckled.
They say that since Mr. Dwayne Dantes is so generous, they're willing to recommend themselves if he lacks a bodyguard. However, they later gave up on the idea since being a bodyguard isn't as free as being a bounty hunter. Even having drinks will have to wait until they're given time off.
That's not a problem for me, but I can only be a bounty hunter.
Gio nodded, jumped off the high stool in front of the bar counter, and didn't waste time heading for the door. The next day, just as Klein finished breakfast and was preparing to head to his garden to have a stroll to aid in his digestion, butler Walter came in from outside and silently followed behind him until there wasn't anyone around. He said politely,
Sir, there are two matters that need your attention.
2 matters?
Klein was somewhat surprised. He thought that there would only be one. Walter nodded.
Yes, the first matter involves the 10% shares in the Backland Bike Company. Someone has already offered £10,000. Sir, do you still wish to continue in the bid?
It has been raised to £10,000. Not bad at all.
Klein deliberately acted stumped as he thought.
I'm new in Backland, and there are many things that need me to hold back on. Let's leave it at that.
All right, sir.
Walter then said,
The cheats who scammed Mam Wahana's husband of the cloth have been captured. The bounty hunter has already arrived and requested payment.
That quickly?
Klein turned his head in shock as he looked at his butler. If he had taken action himself, he was indeed capable of settling it that very day. After, he had dowsing rods seeking to find people, but the problem stemmed from the fact that most bounty hunters weren't seers.
Yes, perhaps it's a beyonder good at tracking and searching for people.
Klein made a preliminary judgment. Walter answered in confirmation.
Yes, it's much faster than I imagined. According to that bounty hunter, she did a reverse search from black market sales before finding the cheats.
The black market peddlers gave in so easily? From the looks of it, they must have been taught a lesson with the fist.
Klein nodded and said,
What's that bounty hunter's name? She's quite capable.
She calls herself CO.
Walter answered truthfully.
No way.
Klein almost stumbled. Thankfully, he had the impressive balance of a clown. After calming the upheavals through his heart while acting calm, he deliberated and said,
Keep the bounty hunter's contact method. Perhaps there might be a chance to gain her assistance in the future.
All right, sir.
Walter didn't find any problems with Dwayne Dantes's instructions. Any decent member of high society kept some unofficial means to their chests. Klein didn't continue on the topic of Gio, as he tersely said,
How much was reclaimed?
The cash and the yet-to-be-sold cloth from the cheats came up to about £850.
Walter had apparently anticipated his employer's inquiry on the matter and had asked ahead of time.
Very good.
Klein nodded and said,
After paying the bounty hunter, help her send the cheats and the goods to the nearby police station.
Northborough Police Station. Wahana and her husband, Bacchus, looked at the high-ranking inspector in front of them as they asked in unison, surprise coloring their voices.
It's been found?
They've been caught?
The high-ranking police inspector smiled in response.
Yes.
When he informed them how much cash and cloth was left, Wahana and Bacchus heaved a collective sigh of relief. They could afford £150 in losses. Furthermore, the remaining cloth still had space for greater appreciation and profit. In essence, they hadn't suffered much of a loss. They repeatedly thanked the inspector until someone invited Bacchus to identify the goods and criminals. Wahana sat there without losing her etiquette. She smiled at the high-ranking inspector and said,
Your efficiency has exceeded my expectations. I'm very curious as to how you found the bunch of cheats.
Being aware that this beautiful and elegant lady knew a member of Parliament of the House of Commons and that she would eventually learn the truth, the high-ranking inspector didn't hide it from her.
In fact, it was completed by a bounty hunter. She investigated the black market of stolen goods and quickly caught the suspects.
You even offered a bounty?
Wahana seemed to gain a full understanding of the whole story. Bor-ah, the inspector shook his head and said,
No, someone beat us to it. He offered 200 pounds.
200 pounds?
Wahana asked in surprise. That wasn't a small sum of money, and it even exceeded the expected profit that her husband would earn from the sale. Seeing the inspector give an affirmative reply, Wahana couldn't help but ask,
Who was it that offered the bounty?
The bounty hunter didn't say, but accompanying her was a gentleman dressed as a butler.
The inspector simply described Walter's looks. Wahana vaguely guessed at the butler's identity as she leaned back slightly, muttering softly to herself.
200 pounds.
In the afternoon, Wahana, who came to Member of Parliament Macht's house to teach his daughter etiquette, first thanked Ma'am Rihanna for extending their help. After the blackish-green-haired Rihanna said a few words of humility, she asked, Wahana, I heard that you're Mr. Dwayne Dantas' etiquette teacher. I wonder what kind of person he is. Wahana deliberated and said,
He's a true gentleman. He's warm-hearted, generous, kind, educated, gentlemanly, and very knowledgeable.
Rihanna nodded slightly upon hearing that before turning to look at her proud daughter and chuckled. Unfortunately, he's a little too old, or he might make a good match. Well, I plan on inviting him to our ball this weekend. Chapter 759, First Dance. Saturday night, 8 p.m., Klein rode his high-end carriage and arrived at 39 Boakland Street, Member of Parliament Macht's house, in 2.5 minutes. After stealing a glance at the lit fountain that was sloshing with water, he buttoned his tailcoat and walked down the carriage before strolling to the house's main entrance. Richardson held an exquisitely packaged bottle of Southville red wine and followed closely behind his employer. After walking through the main door, Klein instantly saw Member of Parliament Macht and his wife Rihanna walk over to welcome him. The former was wearing an olive-green army officer uniform with an orange-red sash around his waist and a few medals hanging from his chest. In the Lowen Kingdom, serving and retired officers enjoyed wearing their military uniforms at balls. The latter was wearing a yellow long dress with frilly sides and rarely seen exquisite lace, making her look different from unmarried ladies. However, she also partially exposed her fair neck and her shoulders. Klein took the bottle of Southville red wine from Richardson's hand and handed it to Member of Parliament Macht, before saying with a bow,
Sorry, I'm late by a few minutes.
This was actually a common situation at Lowen balls. Guests would rather be late by a certain amount of time than be early. This was because the masters of the house might still be busy with the final preparations with the ball. It was the worst time for them to entertain guests, but of course, one had to ensure that they weren't late by more than 10 minutes. If Wahana hadn't specially taught him this, Klein would have definitely come early as a form of respect.
It's fine. The ball hasn't officially begun.
Macht glanced at the Southville red wine as he handed it to his valet before nodding with a smile. At Lowen's high society engagements, one had to bring a gift for the master if it was their first time attending a ball. Alcoholic beverages were the most welcomed, but one had to keep in mind that the first gift had to be something locally produced. After greeting Macht, Klein looked towards Ma'am Rihanna and saw that she had slightly raised her right hand. Hence, he took one step forward and lifted her palm and bent his back to kiss it.
You illuminate the entire ball.
Before the ball began, complimenting the masters of the house was a necessary step in Lowen's social events, and unlike Intis, Lowen's hand-kissing etiquette required the lady to gesture that it was possible before a gentleman could do the kiss. Otherwise, it would be a serious faux pas. Likewise for your arrival. Ma'am Rihanna replied with a smile. Then, the couple led Dwayne Dantes through the corridor and into the main hall where a pleasant tune was echoing. After taking a few steps forward, Maury Macht pointed at a lady in a sky-blue dress.
My daughter, Hazel.
Klein looked at the girl as his pupils suddenly constricted. He knew this girl. To be precise, he had seen her image before. Back when he had asked Arodes where he could obtain a mystical item which could steal the beyonder powers of others, the magic mirror had indicated a scene of an arrogant lady loitering in the sewers, and she was none other than Hazel Macht. She was a lady with wavy black-green hair and bright brown eyes.
She has a mystical item that corresponds to a Prometheus? With her family conditions, why would she be loitering in the sewers? Is it some fortuitous encounter of hers? Was she searching for something, or waiting for something in the sewers? She has already become a beyonder. How did she become one? Could it be that she has a grandpa parasitizing in her body?
Klein, who was donning the skin of Dwayne Dantes, instantly thought of many questions, but he pressed his hand to his chest as he bowed with an unperturbed look.
Good evening, Miss Hazel.
During this process, he stole a glance at Hazel Macht's face and discovered that she wore a composed look. There was an arrogance in her eyes, and all she did was smile politely and answer.
Good evening, Mr. Dantes.
She didn't have any abnormal reaction, which means that she's unable to sense the aura of the gray fog. At the very least, there's no grandpa parasitizing her. I can't be certain for now, and I'll have to continue observing.
Klein stood up straight as he took a cup of pale gold champagne from a waiter's tray. He then began chatting with Member of Parliament Maury Macht.
I never expected you to be a major.
He could tell from the epaulet on Macht's shoulder. If he was a colonel, Klein would have even suspected if the gentleman was also a beyonder, but it was hard to tell for a major.
Haha, it's nothing. There are many opportunities to render meritorious services in Balam.
Maury answered.
Of course, the weather there is especially unsuitable. I've always been suggesting to the Army's higher-ups to design a uniform for West Balam and to get rid of the traditional dark colors. Otherwise, the officers will only feel as if they are beef waiting to be roasted.
As for the enlisted soldiers, most of them wore red tops and white bottoms.
Yes, the weather there is completely different from what it's like in the country. Even Desi Bay isn't that hot.
Klein indicated that he had been to the southern continent, and he had been to either East or West Balam to corroborate his hunting experiences that he had mentioned a few days ago. After a few minutes of small talk, Macht apologized and walked to the staircase with his wife. At the second floor, he raised a cup of red wine while standing by the railings facing the main door and said,
Thank you everyone for coming to our ball. First, let us toast the deities. They are the source of everything beautiful.
He and Mamriana tapped 4 times on their chests as they softly praised the goddess. The other guests also praised the deities they believed in via their own means. Macht continued having his cup raised as he said with a smile.
Second, a toast to the kingdom. It is a stable bedrock.
To the kingdom.
Klein raised his cup of champagne and spoke with the other guests around him. Following that, Macht surveyed the area and asked humorously,
Finally, what shall we toast to?
Klein's mind whirred as he said loudly with a smile.
A toast to the improvement of the air in Backland.
Macht was taken aback as he couldn't help but smile in response.
Excellent. That's a great suggestion. A toast to the improvement of Backland's air. This is a symbol of us living better lives. Cheers.
The fixing of the atmospheric pollution issue had always been one of his political ideals as a House of Commons Member of Parliament. He had ultimately been pushing for the corresponding bills, and he had played a significant role in the improvement of the environment. Therefore, toasting to the improvement in Backland's air was equivalent to toasting to himself. It was more euphemistic and more above board. All the guests echoed in a spirited burst as they finished the drinks in their hands. Right on the heels of that, Member of Parliament Macht held Mamriana's hand, and they went down to the hall. They then started the opening dance in the mellow music. All the gentlemen present began finding their first partners to dance. Klein took another cup of champagne as he leisurely sized up the guests.
Ma'am Mary is here as well.
He swept his gaze and found someone familiar. As one of the major shareholders of the coin company, with a wealth amounting to tens of thousands, Ma'am Mary had formerly hired Sherlock Moriarty to investigate her ex-husband's act of adultery.
She's a member of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council, so it's normal that she has a close relationship with the Member of Parliament.
Klein didn't attempt to invite her to a dance, since he here as Duane Dantes. He didn't know this lady who lived in another street. He retracted his gaze and looked elsewhere. He saw Hazel Mocht holding a cup of white wine and standing to the side. She wore a clear smile of alienation as she watched the gentlemen lock onto their targets to invite them for a dance.
This lady actually looks pretty good. She's dignified and pretty. She should have been the star at this ball, with people yearning to invite her to a dance. However, the way she exudes that look of arrogance, looking down at people with a supercilious look, makes any gentleman who casts his eyes on her shift over to another target. I've seen this look in the eyes of certain beyonders as well. They no longer think of themselves as mortal, and they often have a sense of superiority when facing ordinary folks. This implies that Miss Hazel is likely a beyonder. That's right, if she isn't a beyonder, how would she dare to loiter in the sewers? She's from the Marauder pathway. But how is she to act as a marauder or swindler with such arrogance? It's hard to imagine.
Seeing that the hosts were almost done with the opening dance, he began seriously considering who he could invite.
Duane Dantes is in his early 40s, so it isn't appropriate to invite a lady for his first dance unless it's someone confirmed to be a junior. And the first dance of most ma'ams will be done with their husbands. I should be able to invite people I'm familiar with, or the hosts.
Klein swept the dance floor and found the only lady Duane Dantes was familiar with. It was his etiquette teacher, Wahana.
Invite her? No. She likely already knows that I've secretly helped her. To invite her for the first dance can easily make her misunderstand. It might even affect her relationship with her husband and incur unnecessary trouble for Duane Dantes. It's not like I'm Emperor Roselle, who has a penchant for the wives of others. No, he has a penchant for everything. In short, I should avoid creating gossip.
Klein shifted his gaze and heard the music change. It went from a mellow melody to something brisk. It was a piece of countryside music that was popular in central Lowen. It was well liked by nobles and was often used for the first dance. With the change in music, the gentlemen walked to the ladies and madams they had selected. Klein also noticed that no one approached Hazel Mocht.
She's one of the hosts of this ball. Besides, I can observe her at a close distance. If she really is a beyonder of the Marauder pathway, it implies that the gray fog is able to converge beyonders from the neighboring pathways of the seer pathway.
Klein wore a gentle smile as he unhurriedly walked to the arrogant lady.
Miss Hazel, may I have the pleasure of a dance with you?
Duane Dantes with his white sideburns gave a standard bow as he said. Hazel glanced at him and, after a few seconds of silence, said,
It will be my honor.
She then extended her palm. Klein politely held her hand and entered the dance floor as they began a brisk and lively dance. Glancing at her beautiful but deadpan face, Klein said with a smile as he tried probing,
I just noticed that many young gentlemen wished to invite you to a dance, but they were unable to muster their courage.
Hazel looked up and swept her gaze at him and said,
Mr. Dantes, that's not a polite topic.
Klein choked, lost as to how to reply. Chapter 760. What a Small Circle.
I thought she would contemptuously say that she doesn't like immature and incapable men, hinting that she isn't impressed with ordinary people. Who knew she can't even be bothered to answer this question? This sense of superiority will easily lead to a loss of control for subsequent advancements.
Klein couldn't help but lampoon inwardly. From what he knew, beyonders were only humans who had additional powers. It was equivalent to having plenty of money or status. In fact, they were still considered human, and had no way of escaping human society. Only by reaching sequence 4 would one experience a qualitative change. Furthermore, most demigods continue being active in human society. Even the sequence 1 snake of fate Will Septon is being an obedient unborn fetus. Perhaps only at the level of blasphemer Ammon and the others will they be able to view the real world as a god. Klein's mind whirred as he said,
I'm sorry. I was once a merchant who often spent time in the northern continent and southern continent, and I have had little experience with a ball. I mean, this type of ball.
It's fine.
Hazel replied calmly as though she didn't care about the topic he had just raised. If it were anyone else, they would have been at a loss for a conversation with this arrogant lady. All they could do was focus on the dance, but Klein was considered quite a knowledgeable and experienced person at this point. He knew quite a bit of the different beyonders in the mysterious world, so with his apology, he said with a smile,
This is a challenge that isn't simpler than the sea. It similarly has beautiful scenery but hides countless difficulties. Of course, the sea also has stories of all kinds of treasures. Some of them are clearly fake, but others sound rather realistic but are impossible to verify. It's just like Death's Key that's ranked first amongst them.
Death's Key?
Hazel looked up at Mr. Duane Dantes, who was a lot taller than her. Indeed, a beyonder with a strong sense of superiority would often have their interest piqued when it's something that involves mystery. Klein chuckled inwardly, and he nodded gently.
Yes, it's rumored to be hidden somewhere in the Berserk Sea.
He used the legends he had heard back when he was aboard the White Agate, as he added more of the details he had heard during his career as an adventurer. During this process, he couldn't avoid mentioning the 4 kings and the 7 pirate admirals. Hazel was clearly interested in these as she responded to Klein in a rare instance. She would even occasionally ask other questions, making the dance between them less awkward. Without realizing it, their dance came to an end. Klein skillfully ended the topic and switched to asking,
Do you plan on returning to where you were, or do you plan on heading over to get some food?
After a dance, the gentleman had to abide by the lady's wishes and send her to where she wished to go. It didn't have to be where she originally stood. Hazel opened her mouth as though she wished to ask further, but she ultimately didn't speak further. She nodded her head in a reserved manner.
Where I was.
Hey, she clearly misses the stories at sea. She's just a big brat. As long as you grasp her temper and find what interests her, she's actually not difficult to interact with.
Klein held back his smile as he sent Hazel back to the periphery of the dance floor where she previously stood. As for him, he acted casual as he walked to the long table that had all kinds of food placed on it. He picked up a plate and began to scoop a serving of pan-fried dragon bone fish, and he matched it with some sliced black pepper steak.
Compared to the dance and entertaining others, food is the true essence of a gathering.
As Klein thought, he worked hard at trying to make his appearance, while eating, appear elegant enough. At this moment, he saw Ma'am Mary walk over and fork a piece of foie gras soaked in red wine onto her plate. When Klein saw her glance at him, he politely smiled with a nod as a response.
How may I address you? I haven't met you before at the balls and banquets hosted by Member of Parliament Macht.
Perhaps it was because of Duane Dantes' gray sideburns and deep blue eyes that were very charming. The ordinary-looking Ma'am Mary, with slightly high cheekbones, took the initiative to ask. Klein laughed and replied,
I'm a merchant who just returned from Desi Bay, Duane Dantes. I live on this street. Ma'am, do I have the honor of knowing your name?
Mary nodded in thought, and she roughly understood this man to be a merchant who was trying hard to enter high society, just like she was previously. She said with a smile, Mary Schott, Coin Company's executive director. She didn't mention that she was the biggest shareholder of the Coin Company, or mention that she was a member of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council. This was a Lowen-styled euphemism.
Mary Schott. She has taken up her original last name. Right, she is already divorced.
Klein silently thought to himself and said with a smile,
I know of this company. Its main business is in anthracite and high-quality coal. It has expanded rapidly in the past few months. To be frank, I have the intention of investing in it, but I don't seem capable of competing with the rest.
After the atmospheric bills were passed, there was a drastic increase in the demand of anthracite and high-quality coal. Coin Company managed to develop itself in ways that exceeded its past efforts. Its overall valuation had already exceeded £250,000. Klein wasn't shooting his mouth when talking about investing, but that he believed that this industry would become even more important in the coming years, until humanity found a resource to replace it. Mary had always been very proud of the National Atmospheric Pollution Report she pushed for, as well as the development of the Coin Company, so she couldn't help but smile when she heard that. This is because people are beginning to pay attention to the environment that they are living in. Having said that, she gently sighed and said, "As it gets better, trouble also increases as a result." Having just acquainted himself, Klein didn't ask about the trouble. With his prior acquaintance with Ma'am Mary, he easily found a topic of interest and had a good conversation with her.
Her attitude towards Sherlock Moriarty and Dwayne Dantes is very different. Despite being someone she knows, just a change in looks and identity will be given a brand new form of treatment without any problems arising. This feeling is truly magical.
As they chatted, Klein felt wistful as he felt that the additional faceless potion he had consumed was quickly digesting. After a few minutes, a handsome man with bright blonde hair walked over with a cup of red wine. He smiled at Ma'am Mary and said,
"Mary, what are you talking about?"
"Hibbert, this is Mr. Dwayne Dantes from Desi. His experiences at sea and West Balaam are truly interesting." Mary immediately introduced the two. "Dwayne, this is Mr. Hibbert Hall, the eldest son of the Earl of Eastchester. We should be calling him Lord, but he prefers people to address him as Mr. Chief Secretary. He's the Chief Secretary of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council."
I've heard you mention him before. Of course, that was when the identity, Sherlock Moriarty, was still active. The Earl of Eastchester is a major noble in the nation. He's considered the top brass when it comes to high society.
Klein politely bowed without appearing overly low.
Please permit me to convey my thanks as an ordinary citizen. The work of the National Atmospheric Pollution Council has allowed us to live in better living environments.
Hibbert Hall was rather pleased with such sincere gratitude, so he smiled in reply.
"This is all thanks to the hard work all of us have put in."
By the side, Mary said with a smile, "Dwayne, don't mention such matters again. You will make Hibbert arrogant." "No, I was just joking. He's more humble than all the noble children I know. He should be having a vacation in the Eastchester County's Five at this time and spending his time hunting with his friends. But he immediately returned after I sent him a telegram informing him that I was invited to this ball by Member of Parliament Mocht."
It's not only for this ball. There are many things that require my attention. My father, Earl Hall, would also frequently commute between Backland and our fief before June.
Hibbert seriously explained,
A gentleman who places great importance on his social image.
Klein made a preliminary judgment. When Mary heard that, she asked in passing, "Is there anything still keeping you back? When are you leaving Backland?"
Most of my work has already been completed. There's only one matter left. My sister Audrey is very interested in the Backland Bike Company's 10% shares. She hired a specialized team to help her in the negotiations, and I'm responsible for overseeing the matter.
Hibbert said without much thought.
Backland Bike Company's 10% shares? What a coincidence. I have to say that the circle of high society is quite small after all.
Klein sighed inwardly as he deliberately mentioned,
I also found a team to attempt to purchase the 10% shares, but I only managed to offer up to £9,000. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to compete with the other competitors and could only give up.
Hibbert glanced at him with a look of surprise.
You have good taste.
He didn't mention how much his side's bid was to prevent his competitor from participating again. £9,000. Mary silently muttered, realizing she had underestimated Dwayne Dantes' wealth. At this moment, the music for the third dance sounded. Hibbert Hall turned to Mary and said,
May I have the pleasure of a dance with you?
That's what I've been waiting for. Mary immediately extended her hand. This made Klein unable to exchange name cards with them. However, he wasn't in a rush because it was still some time before the ball ended. After getting another plate of food, He enjoyed it while looking at the dance floor, admiring the madams and ladies dancing. During this process, he noticed that Member of Parliament Macht and Ma'am Rihanna were mingling with different guests from time to time, having happy conversations with them and even dancing with them.
According to Walter, after confirming the guest list, the hosts need to seriously conclude every guest's preference and background, so as to tailor a different topic of conversation or jokes for them. This is to make everyone feel as though they are being treated uniquely. Socializing in high society sure is troublesome. And this might be why Loanese gentlemen tend to have receding hairlines.
Klein lampooned as he sighed in reflection. He retracted his gaze and looked at his cleared plate. He seriously considered if he should invite another lady or madam to a dance, or if he should eat a little more. At this moment, he caught Hazel Mock's figure through the corner of his eye. She was heading for the third story with hurried footsteps,